a young maidservant to Trinette. She was a servant to a cruel man called David Seaton, who, when Gellis started to leave the house at night, he became suspicious. And his suspicions, why they turned to accusations of witchcraft, especially when he learned that Gellis was adept at curing the ill, and he unlawfully imprisoned the young maid in his own house, for he was a deputy bailey who abused his powers, and along with his son, who was also called David Seaton, they set about extracting a confession for Gellis. The first torture she endured was having her fingers crushed by the pillywinks. But still, she would not confess. The next torture she endured was having a rope bound around her head and her skull crushed by wrenching. Still, Gellis would not confess. Then she was stripped, shorn of all body hair, and searched for the deal's mark, for a piece of skin that says to feel no pain. And they found this mark by the insertion of a long, thin needle that was placed deep into every inch of skin upon a woman's body. Nothing was sacred to these men. Well, Seaton, he allegedly found the mark upon Gellis's throat, broken by sleep deprivation, isolation, and sustained torture. The young maidservant finally confessed that she was a witch. She became a compliant witness. And named at the behest of the twa Seatons, she named several others, including Agnes Sampson, John Tame, several of the high society in Edinburgh, and Lord Bothwell. She was then arrested and taken to the Auld Tolbooth. These confessions initiated the North Berwick Witch Trials of 1590, the first major witch persecution in Scotland. They were the spark that lit the flame of the burning times. During these lengthy trials, there were many counter-allegations, many different things said, as there were 70 people that were believed to have been executed during the trials. And the king himself, King James VI, he became personally interested when he heard that witches were raising storms to prevent him bringing his new bride Anne across the water to Scotland. The main depositions against this young lassie, who they estimate was still in her teenage years, were as follows. That way other witches, she had sailed on the Firth of Forth, and they had met a witch for Copenhagen, and they had plotted and schemed, and the deal had raised a storm that wrecked both land and sea at Michaelmas. That, in Ormiston Woods, the witches met. On the ground there was a piece of rope, and Gellis, she pulled on that rope, saying this: "Ho! And Gellis asked him, "Will you destroy David's Satan?" To which he replied, "Yes." And he gave the witches some bits of broken glass mixed with cord, and he told them to scatter them in the woods. But instead of this affecting Satan, this malice was alighted to his daughter instead. Then it was alleged that Gellis, along with others, had created a waxen image of His Majesty. It had been wrapped up in white linen, and they passed it around the group. And each person there chanted his name. James the Sixth, James the Sixth, doom, doom, James the Sixth, James the Sixth, doom, doom. And then it was melted in the fire. And it was at this same meeting that Agnes Sampson, the healer, had brought along a bottle. They had urine mixed with toad droppings. And this was to be put in His Majesty's way to cause his demise. And they also said, worst of all, that at least 100 witches gathered on the Auld Kirk Green in North Berwick. And that during this Sabbath, Gellis played the very song that you've just heard, or at least the first two lines. Come and go ye afore, come and go ye. And then she played. On her roof hat, she was the first person in recorded history to ever play one of these. And she played this unholy sound to raise the devil. And the pulpit was lit with black candles. And when the deil appeared, he appeared as a muckle black man with a long black cloak and a skull bonnet on top of his head. And this terrible sight was something to behold, and that each person there paid homage to the deil. First of all, it was the women, and they turned 6 times with their sins, while the men, they turned 9 times with their sins. An unholy movement that creates evil. It is against God and against the way of the Son. At this meeting, the deil commanded that they open up 3 graves, 2 within the graveyard and yin without, and that from these graves they take fingers and toes and the noses of the corpses, and that each witch there should be given some, and they should make this into corpse powder, and they should spread this about the land to take evil. At the end of their great Sabbath, the devil raised his cloak, and every witch kissed his arse. Well, you might imagine, all this talk of devils and raising storms, it perked the interest of the king, because Gellis was also accused of taking part in a diabolical ritual where a cat was baptised in the crook of a chimney, where bits of bodies were sewn onto his paws, and it was flung into the pier head at Leith to raise a storm. And he called the young girl to come before him. Well, you could imagine. Who was she compared to His Majesty the King? She was just a maidservant, just a young lassie for Trinent, an ordinary young lassie who had the unfortunate luck to work for an evil man who had broken her spirit and made her accuse all these other people and all these terrible things. So even though her fingers were crushed by the pillywings, she was forced to play her Jew's hair for His Majesty the King and sing, "Come and go ye, for come and go ye." It was said that just before her execution on the 4th of December in the year 1591, that she fell to her knees and she begged God's forgiveness. Not for being a witch, but for condemning other innocents to death. She gave the names of Barbara Napier and Euphemie McCalzine for Edinburgh, and she swore that they were innocent, and that she would answer to her Lord for what she had done, nay, for sinking ships. I do not know if God was listening to that young woman on that day, or what happened to her immortal soul. But I do know the flames burned bright that night above Castle Hill in Edinburgh.